What is this place? Why am I here?
60 million won. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the room. Serafina Benjamin stood on the platform, her wrists bound by polished silver restraints. Below her, 23 men in suits watched. Some held paddles. All of them were looking at her. She had dressed carefully, believing she was going to a job interview that her boyfriend, James Whitmore, had arranged. He had told her presentation mattered. He had sent a car, texted the address, and wished her luck with a thumbs-up emoji. He already knew how the evening would end, after drugging her and bringing her into the underworld where this auction was waiting. She found him in the second row. Navy suit, dark blonde hair, paddle flat on the table. 2 years together. He glanced up and met her eyes. He did not flinch. "James," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What is this? How did I get here? Where am I?" "This is an auction, baby," he replied. "No, it can't be. Tell them there's a mistake. I don't belong here. You do belong here. Your father owes me money. This is how it gets settled." "What are you saying?" "I am your girlfriend." "You were useful," he said. She pulled at the post. It held. Staff moved between her and the steps. 65, James called, raising his paddle. Her eyes scanned the room. Every face. Every exit. Staff everywhere. Nowhere to go. Then she saw him. Last row, shadowed, paddle down. He was watching her, not with appetite, but with decision. She met his gaze. Something shifted inside her, small and involuntary, like a compass needle finding north. The bidding climbed. At 100 million, James set his paddle down with a satisfied exhale. His work was done. The silver-haired man from the back pushed it higher. 110, 120, 140, 150, said with the authority of a closing move. The auctioneer let the silence build. 150 million won going. The hand went up. Far left. Last row. One clean, unhurried movement. The room changed before he even spoke. The staff near the exits shifted. The auctioneer's hands went still on his podium. "She leaves with me," the man said. "For words," said the way a door closes. Final and complete. The silver-haired man set his paddle down. James looked up from his water glass. The auctioneer's voice changed register entirely. "Mr. Kong," he said. The man stood and walked into the light. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, his charcoal suit fitted without strain. Sharp-boned face, dark hair, mid-30s. A single watch on his left wrist. He moved with the steady ease of someone who had already decided where he was going. He reached the base of the stage and looked up at her. He looked at her wrists first, then her face. Something moved in his expression. Brief, contained, controlled back almost immediately. But she saw it. It was anger. Quiet, patient, old anger. The kind that belongs to someone who has seen this before and has not made peace with it. He turned to the staff member at the side of the stage. "Release her," he said. The auctioneer nodded. The staff member climbed the steps, produced a key, and unlocked the restraint. It opened. Serafina pulled her wrists free. James stood. "Do-hyun, this is a private financial arrangement." Kong Do-hyun turned and looked at him. He said nothing. He simply looked. James sat back down. Do-hyun looked back up at Serafina. "You can step down," he said. She walked down the steps. When her feet hit the floor, she was 3 feet from him. She looked up and said the only thing there was to say. "Thank you," she said. His attendant appeared with her bag, her blazer, her portfolio. She took them and held them against her chest. "Can you walk?" he said. "Yes," she said. He turned toward the exit, and she followed him out of the room. "Before we continue, I would like to welcome you to Afro-Korean Mafia series by Jasmine. To everyone returning, welcome back. To our new viewers, I am so glad you found this channel. Kindly like, subscribe, and become part of this growing community. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments, because we have viewers from all over the world, and I love knowing where this story is reaching. The car was black with dark windows, and it was already running when they came through the building's side exit into the night air of Seoul. His attendant opened the rear door. Serafina got in without hesitation, because the alternative was the building she had just come out of, and she was not going back toward it. Do-hyun got in from the other side. He sat at the opposite end of the rear seat with the full width of the car between them. He did not crowd her. He did not fill the silence with reassurance. He looked out his window and let the city move past. She sat with her bag in her lap and her portfolio across her knees, and she rubbed her wrists slowly, working the redness out of the skin where the restraint had pressed. Her wrists ached with a dull insistence that she was going to feel tomorrow morning. Outside, Seoul moved in its ordinary evening configuration. Neon and street lamp, the distant sound of traffic, ordinary people walking back from ordinary places. She watched it and felt the strangeness of the ordinary, the way it continued on completely unaware of what had just happened in a building 2 streets back. Your boyfriend organized tonight, Do-hyun said without turning from his window. Former boyfriend, she said. A brief pause. He has your apartment address, he said. Going home alone tonight is not a safe decision. I know, she said. She had already thought about this in the 40 seconds it had taken to walk from the building to the car. She had thought about her apartment in Mapo-gu and about James, who had sent one car for her tonight and could send another one. I am taking you to my compound, he said. Songbuk-gu. You will have your own room. You will be safe there. All right, she said. He turned from the window and looked at her. She thought he had been expecting resistance, and the absence of it had mildly surprised him. My father, she said. James said he owes him money. I did not know about any debt. I need to call him tonight. Yes, he said. And I need my phone back, she said. The staff at the venue took it. He said something brief in Korean to his attendant in the front seat. The attendant made a call. By the time they pulled up to the compound gate, the attendant's phone had already received a confirmation. It will be returned tonight, Do-hyun said. She looked at him. How? She said. I have people at the venue, he said. She looked at him for a moment longer, and then she looked forward. How do you know James Whitmore? She said. We operate in overlapping professional circles, he said. I know his business practices. I know what he is capable of. When I received information that he was planning tonight, I came to see it myself. And to stop it, she said. He was quiet for a moment. To decide whether to stop it, he said. Once I saw what was happening, there was only one decision available. She turned to look at him fully. You came into that room not knowing for certain whether you would intervene, she said. I needed to see the full picture, he said. I do not move on incomplete information. And what was the complete picture? She said. He turned and met her eyes. A woman with her wrists tied to a post in a room full of men who had paid to be there, he said. That was sufficient. She held his gaze for a moment, and then looked back at the window. Thank you, she said again, and this time she meant it differently. Not the automatic thank you of the platform, but something considered, deliberate, the gratitude of someone who has had a few minutes to understand the weight of what was done for her. He did not respond to it. He looked forward, but she saw his jaw shift slightly, a small tightening, then a release, and she filed it away. The compound appeared at the end of a private road behind walls of old stone covered in ivy that had gone red with the season. The gate was electronic and heavy, and it opened as the car approached. Inside, the main house rose in pale stone and dark wood. Traditional architecture expanded quietly into something that accommodated modern life without advertising it. The gardens were immaculate in the particular way that suggests daily attention. Low lighting ran along the stone paths. A woman was waiting at the entrance. She was perhaps 50, with short graying hair and the composed efficiency of someone who had managed this household for a long time and had developed a talent for making things appear without being asked. Mrs. Han, Do-hyun said, and nothing else. Mrs. Han turned to Serafina with a small bow. Your room is ready, she said. Please follow me. Serafina looked at Do-hyun. He met her eyes briefly. We will talk tomorrow morning, he said. Sleep if you can. She followed Mrs. Han through the house and up a wide staircase to a room on the second floor. The room had a window that looked out over the back garden. The bed had white linen, turned down precisely. On the small table by the window, a tray held tea, a covered bowl of rice porridge, and a small dish of kimchi. In the bathroom, folded with the neatness of hotel linens, were a set of clothes, simple, well-made, in her approximate size. Mrs. Han opened the wardrobe to show her a small selection of clothing. A few things that may fit, she said. Mr. Kong asked me to prepare them. Serafina looked at the wardrobe, then at the tray of food, then at the turned-down bed. He had arranged all of this before he went to the auction. He had known he was going to bring someone back tonight, and he had made sure the room was ready. She sat on the edge of the bed when Mrs. Han left, and she held her own hands in her lap, and she let the evening arrive in full. She had been held on a platform in a room full of men. Her boyfriend of 2 years had watched it happen and had bid to drive her price up. She was sitting in a stranger's house in Songbuk-gu because going home was not safe. The stranger had walked into the room that contained her, and had said 4 words, and had changed the direction of the evening with a hand raised once. She sat with all of this, and she did not let herself cry, because the crying would come later, and right now she had phone calls to make. Her phone was delivered to the room by a quiet young man named Jai. Was 17 minutes after she sat down. She thanked him. He bowed and left. She called her father. He answered on the first ring. He was awake. She knew from the specific texture of his voice that he had been awake for hours, and that he already knew something had gone wrong tonight. Her father was a man who knew things before they were confirmed. He had always been this way, a kind of emotional radar that made him a wonderful father and had made him, apparently, terrible at hiding a financial crisis from the person who loved him most. "Tell me," she said. He told her. 18 months ago, he had borrowed 120 million won from James Whitmore's investment group to expand the import business into a new distribution line he had believed in completely. The terms had looked straightforward. The distribution deal had collapsed at month 8 because a key partner had pulled out without warning. The repayments had fallen behind. James had been understanding, patient. He had restructured the terms in ways her father had not fully parsed at the time, in ways that made the original figure look small by comparison. He kept saying we had time, her father said. Every time I brought up a payment structure, he would say, "There is no rush, Benjamin. We will find a way." He said it for 8 months. She understood. Every reassurance had been a delay tactic. James had been waiting for the debt to grow large enough, and for his arrangement with her father to become personal enough through her, that tonight was possible. She had been the insurance policy from the beginning. "Papa," she kept her voice steady because his was not. "Do not contact James. Do not respond to any communication from him or from his group. I will call you tomorrow when I have more information. Do you understand? Where are you? Are you safe?" "I am safe," she said. "I am with someone who helped me tonight. I will explain everything tomorrow. Right now I need you to stay where you are and let me handle this." A long pause. "Your mother is asking," he said. "Tell her I am fine," she said. "I will explain everything in person very soon." "Papa, do you trust me?" "You are my daughter," he said. "I have trusted you since the day you were born." She closed her eyes for 1 second. "Then wait for my call tomorrow," she said. She called Amma next. Amma was her closest friend in Seoul, a Ghanaian woman from Accra who had come to Seoul for a finance degree 11 years ago and had never fully left. She worked in international finance. She had good instincts. She kept her head in crises. And she was the kind of friend who, when you called at 11 at night, picked up the phone and did not ask if it was a good time before she had heard what the situation was. Serafina told her everything. Amma listened without interrupting. When the account was complete, Amma was quiet for 5 full seconds, which for Amma was the equivalent of anyone else's extended silence. Then she said, "Kong Do-hyun." "Yes," Serafina said. "Serafina." Amma's voice was careful, which meant she was choosing words rather than producing them. "He runs the second largest private acquisitions and security network in South Korea. He has connections to organized operations that Seoul's authorities have been aware of for years and have not been able to prosecute because he is meticulous. He does not act without reason. He does not make unnecessary moves. If he was in that room tonight, and he moved the way you are describing, he was there with a specific purpose." "He said one of his people informed him of the event," Serafina said. "Then the question is why he went personally," Amma said. "A man like Kong Do-hyun does not need to attend in person to intervene. He could have sent 3 people to dismantle that room without being present himself." Serafina looked at the window. The garden below was still and dark. "He said he came to see it himself," she said. "To be certain." "Certain of what?" Amma said. "That the situation was what he thought it was," she said. Amma was quiet for a moment. "Watch what he does," she said finally. "Not what he says. Everything he does in the next few days will tell you more than anything he says tonight." They talked for another 40 minutes. When she put the phone down, she ate the rice porridge because it was there and because her body had been running on adrenaline since 7 and it needed something real. The porridge was exactly the right temperature, which meant Mrs. Han had timed its preparation to the moment the room was occupied. She lay in the white-linened bed and looked at the ceiling. She thought about James at her parents' table, the way her mother had called him dependable, the way her father had clapped him on the shoulder and said, "This is a good man, Serafina. Hold on to this one." She thought about the Sunday 2 months ago when James had talked about the neighborhood they might move to when they were ready, pointing at listings on his phone with the casual confidence of someone who had already pictured the future. He had been picturing a different future entirely. She lay in the dark and the anger kept its steady tide, and she let it because it was cleaner than grief and more useful. And eventually the compound went fully quiet around her, and she slept. The first full day at the compound she woke at 5:30 and could not go back to sleep. She lay in the white linened bed and listened to the house and made a decision. She was not going to spend the days here moving carefully around the edges of someone else's space, grateful and quiet and careful not to take up too much room. She was going to be functional. She was going to work. She was going to treat this compound as a temporary base of operations and herself as someone with a life to return to. Because she did. And the clearest path back to it was to keep moving toward it rather than waiting for the situation to resolve itself around her. She got up. She found the kitchen before Mrs. Han arrived. She made tea badly using the wrong ratio and drank it anyway, and stood at the kitchen window and watched the garden come into its morning light, and made a list in her notebook of everything she needed to do. Call the consulting firm and confirm the interview was still active. Review the portfolio sections she had been preparing. Contact her professional references and give them a heads up that someone might reach out. Research the firm's recent projects so thoroughly that when she sat in front of the panel, she was the most prepared person they had spoken to all season. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop when Mrs. Han arrived at 6:15 and found her there. Mrs. Han looked at the tea Serafina had made, looked at the ratio in the cup, and without a word took the cup, emptied it, and made a fresh one from scratch. She set it in front of Serafina and went to start breakfast. Serafina looked at the new cup. She looked at Mrs. Han's back at the stove. "Thank you," she said. "You used too much leaf," Mrs. Han said without turning around. "I know," Serafina said. "Tomorrow I will show you," Mrs. Han said. Serafina looked at her laptop screen and felt something loosen slightly in the tightness she had been carrying since the night before. It was a small thing. A woman correcting her tea and offering to show her tomorrow. The casual implication of continuity. The assumption that tomorrow she would be here, and they would be in this kitchen again. She turned back to her research and worked until breakfast appeared beside her laptop without announcement. She was awake before 7 on the second morning. She washed, dressed simply from the wardrobe Mrs. Han had shown her, and took her tea out to the rear terrace. The back terrace looked over the garden. Stone paths between beds of late autumn flowers. A small sitting area with iron furniture painted black. The morning was cool and gray, and the ivy on the far wall was the deep red of the season. Du-hyun was already there. He was in a dark pullover and trousers rather than a suit, which was the first time she had seen him without the formal armor of the jacket, and she registered the difference without fully analyzing it. He sat with a mug in both hands and a single document on the armrest beside him. He looked up when she came through the door, and then looked at his document, which she understood to mean that she was welcome to sit and not required to explain herself. She sat in the chair across from him. The garden was doing its quiet early work. A bird moved in the ivy on the far wall, invisible, making small sounds. "My father borrowed 120 million won," she said. "Original principal," Du-hyun said. Whitmore's restructured terms put the current claimed figure at 180. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "Can it be brought back to the original?" "It already has been," he said. "My financial team contacted his group this morning at 6. She looked at him. The morning was barely light. "You started at 6, she said. "I started at 5, he said. 6 was when the contact was made." She held this. He had been awake before dawn working on her father's debt. "The new terms," she said carefully. "What do they look like?" "Original principal only," he said. "A repayment schedule your father can manage by restructuring the business rather than liquidating it. No punitive terms. No interest restructuring." She looked at him for a long moment. "That is very generous," she said. "It is correct," he said, the same word he had used in the car. "Not generous. Correct." As though generosity implied something optional, and this was simply what the situation required. She looked at the garden. A pale light was beginning to arrive in the sky above the ivy wall. "James will not accept this quietly," she said. "I know," he said. "He has already been in contact with 2 of my associates this morning. He is framing last night as interference in a private financial arrangement." She turned to look at him. "He came prepared for resistance," she said. "He planned for the possibility that something might disrupt the auction." "Yes," Du-hyun said. "The men in that room," she said. "Some of them are connected to him." "Several," he said. She thought about this. The arrangement had been architectural. James had not simply planned to recover a debt. He had built a structure. If she had gone with one of those men last night, James would have had leverage inside Do-hyun's circle. A man who could be pressured. A relationship that could be used. He was not only recovering money, she said. He was building a position. Do-hyun set his mug down and looked at her fully. It was the same look from the auction room. The specific attention of someone taking something seriously. You understand this quickly, he said. I was the instrument in the plan, she said. I have every motivation to understand it clearly. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The controlled precursor to one. The thing that happens in the face before the face decides whether to complete the expression. Stay for a week, he said, while I manage the associates and the political pressure he is building. After a week we reassess together. Your decisions are yours. All right, she said. He looked at her again with the mild surprise of someone whose negotiation had not required negotiating. You pulled me off a platform last night, she said simply. I trust your judgment on what is safe. This time the thing at the corner of his mouth did not stop itself. It arrived briefly and was gone, but she saw it, and she stored it carefully. Mrs. Han came out with 2 plates and set them between the chairs. Neither of them commented on the fact that she had set the table for 2. On the 3rd evening she passed Do-hyun's study, and the door was fully open. He was standing at his desk, not sitting. His jacket was off, and his sleeves were rolled to the elbow, which was the first time she had seen him without the full formal armor of his professional presentation. One hand was flat on the desk, and one was pressed to his forehead while he spoke into his phone in rapid Korean. She could not understand the words. She understood the posture. The posture was of someone managing something that was not cooperating, and who was applying more precision to it rather than more force, which she recognized as a specific kind of exhausting. She kept walking. In the kitchen she made 2 cups of tea. She stood at the counter while they steeped, and she thought about whether to bring one, and decided that the decision was simple. He had been on the phone for 3 hours according to the sounds she had been tracking from her room, and a person who had been on the phone for 3 hours needed tea regardless of who they were. She knocked on the open door. He turned from the desk. He looked at her and at the cup. Mrs. Han, he started. Mrs. Han is in the kitchen, she said. I made it. She set the cup on the corner of his desk, the corner that was clear of documents. You have been on the phone for 3 hours. He looked at the cup. Thank you, he said. The 2 words came out differently from how he usually said things. Slightly less processed. As though the professional layer of him was too occupied with the phone call to manage the small transaction of receiving something, and the unmanaged version came through instead. She nodded and turned to leave. Serafina. She turned back. He was looking at her with an expression she had not seen from him before. The expression of someone who has made a decision about whether to say something and made it in real time rather than in advance. The associate who informed me about last night, he said. He described you before I went. She waited. He told me about your work, he said. How you came to Seoul. What you had built here over 3 years. He was troubled by what Whitmore was planning because he had taken the time to understand who was going to be in that room. He did not have to do that. He did it anyway. He paused. He has daughters, he said. 2 of them. She stood in the doorway with the corridor light behind her. What is his name? She said. Shin Taeyong, he said. I would like to thank him, she said. When this is over. He held her gaze. I will arrange it, he said. She nodded and left. She went back to her room and sat on the bed and held the specific texture of what she was feeling. Not gratitude exactly, though that was part of it. It was the feeling of being known, of her history having been read by someone who had been troubled by what was being planned for her, troubled enough to go to his superior and lay out the full picture. Because he had daughters and he understood what the full picture meant. She had been in Seoul for 3 years building a life. Tonight she had learned that the specific shape of that life had been what moved someone to act. She sat with this for a long time. On the 5th morning, Do-hyun did not come to the terrace. She sat outside with her tea and her laptop, and the morning arrived without him, and after 40 minutes she became aware that she had checked the back door 6 times and had not retained a single sentence of what she had been reading. She looked at the garden. She closed the laptop. She went inside and found him in the main room standing at the window that looked toward the front gate. He had his phone in his hand, but he was not looking at it. He was looking at the gate with the focused stillness of someone who was thinking rather than watching. He turned when she came in. Whitmore was at the gate this morning, he said. At 6. He spoke to the intercom for 4 minutes. She felt the cold arrive in her stomach. What did he say? He requested entry. Do-hyun looked at the phone in his hand. He said he wanted to resolve the situation privately. He came here, she said. Yes. She thought about James at 6 in the morning at the gate of this compound. James, who had sent a car for her and arranged a venue and spent 2 years constructing a plan with the patience of someone who believed he would eventually get everything he wanted. He knows I am here, she said. Yes, Do-hyun said. She looked at him. That does not frighten you, she said. It tells me something useful, he said. He came himself rather than sending someone. The people he usually uses to pressure situations have pulled back. He is operating with less support than he had. She looked at the window. He came to show me he knows where I am, she said. Yes, Do-hyun said. That is also what it was. She stood with this. She let it be what it was. A man she had trusted for 2 years standing at a gate at 6 in the morning to remind her that he could find her wherever she was. She let the fear of it arrive, and she did not push it away, because pushing it away would not make it less real. All right, she said. He looked at her. He knows where I am, she said. So do you. The difference is I chose to be here and I trust the gate. She looked at Do-hyun directly. Carry on with whatever you were planning. I am going back to the terrace. He looked at her for a long moment with an expression she had not seen from him yet and could not fully name. She went back to the terrace and opened her laptop, and this time she retained every sentence. Her real interview happened by video call on the 6th morning. She sat at the desk in her room in her cream blazer and conducted it as though her wrists had not been bound 6 days ago. The interview lasted 55 minutes. The offer came the next morning. She read the email twice. Senior consultant, hospitality development firm, East Asia and West Africa travel required. The kind of role she had been building toward for 3 years. She was in the garden when Do-hyun came outside. Good news, she said before he asked. A job offer. The consulting role I had been preparing for. Congratulations, he said. 2 words. Delivered directly, without decoration. She looked at him and found that the absence of performance made it feel more genuine than elaborate enthusiasm would have. Thank you, she said. He sat down across from her. Whitmore's primary counsel contact withdrew this morning, he said. 2 of the 3 associates have stepped back from his proposal. You move quickly, she said. When it matters, he said. She looked at the garden. A small bird landed on the stone path and then left. When I move out of here, she said, into a new apartment, he will try again. He is not the kind of person who accepts a loss and moves on. No, Do-hyun agreed. He will reframe. Find another angle. Then I need to be ready, she said. He reached into his jacket and set a plain card on the armrest between them. 1 number on it. Call me when something feels wrong, he said. Before you try to handle it alone. She picked up the card. All right, she said. He stood to leave. Do-hyun, she said. He turned. What did it cost you to go into that room last night? She said. Professionally. By intervening publicly the way you did. He was quiet for a moment. Some alliances that were already thin became thinner, he said. Some people who were watching for a reason to position against me found one. And you went anyway, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at him in the morning light. Was it worth it? She said. He turned and met her eyes. Ask me that in a year, he said. She held his gaze. All right, she said. I will. He looked at the garden and she looked at the garden, and the silence between them had a particular quality. Not the silence of 2 people who have nothing to say, but the silence of 2 people who have more than they are ready to say and are choosing, both of them, to let it wait. She visited her parents on Saturday. Taeho drove her, a man in his 30s who drove smoothly and watched the mirrors and said very little, which she appreciated. He waited in the car outside her parents' building in Seochogu. Her mother met her at the door with the expression of a woman who has been containing something large for several days and is very close to the limit of her containment. Her father was in the kitchen with tea. She sat at the kitchen table, and she told them what had happened. She told it clearly, in order, without softening it beyond what was necessary for them to hear it and stay functional. She told them about the building and the restraint and the bidding and James in the second row explaining the debt settlement with the patience of a man at a business meeting. Her mother went through several stages in the space of 5 minutes. Her father looked at the table and looked at his hands and looked at the table again. When she finished, her mother said 1 word. The word was James, but the way she said it took up the space of several sentences. Mama, Serafina said. I am not going to do anything, her mother said, with the tone of someone who was absolutely considering doing something. You are not, Serafina confirmed. What you are going to do is let me handle this. Her father looked up. The man who has the debt now, he said. Kang Du-hyun. Yes, she said. What kind of man is he? Her father said. She thought about the terrace and the morning tea and the document on the armrest, and the second he had looked at her smile for too long before looking away. She thought about a gate at 6 in the morning, and the word sufficient, and the way he had said ask me in a year. He is complicated, she said, and I do not fully know him yet, but he is not like James. What James did at that table. At your table, Papa, Du-hyun would not do. Her father looked at her for a long moment, the way he looked at things he was deciding whether to trust. You are certain? He said. I am getting certain, she said. Her father nodded. It was the nod of a man who is transferring the weight of a decision onto someone he has decided to believe in. And she felt the weight of it arrive. She stayed 3 hours. She helped her mother reorganize the kitchen pantry. She sat with her father and they went through the full details of the business. All of them, no omissions, no managed truths. And she made notes and asked questions and saw the recovery path more clearly than she had from the compound terrace. When she left, her mother held her at the door for a long time. You look different, her mother said quietly, into her shoulder. Different how? Serafina said. Her mother pulled back and looked at her face. Less afraid than I expected you to be, she said. Serafina thought about this on the drive back. By the time Taeho pulled through the compound gate, she had identified what it was. It was not the absence of fear. It was the presence of something else alongside it. James called on Sunday evening. She was in the garden when her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and felt the specific cold clarity of someone who has been waiting for something and is now ready for it. She answered. Serafina. His voice had changed. The unhurried composure of the auction room was gone. There was something controlled in its place, but the control was effortful in a way it had not been before. James, she said. I need you to understand that what happened the other night was a result of a situation that got out of hand, he said. Your father's position, the debt terms, the way things escalated. The auction was not a situation that got out of hand, she said. It was a plan you executed carefully over 18 months. Silence. You built our relationship as access to my father, she said. When the debt reached the size you needed, you arranged a venue. You had me transported there under a false premise. And you sat in the second row and bid on me to drive the price up. That is not a situation that got out of hand. That is who you are. If you would just, do not contact my father, she said. Do not contact me without legal representation present. She ended the call. She sat in the garden for a long time afterward. The compound was quiet around her. The ivy on the far wall moved slightly in a wind she could not feel from her chair. Above the wall, the Seoul sky was its night configuration. The orange-gray of a city that never goes fully dark. She heard the back door open. Du-hyun came out. He was still dressed from the day, no jacket, his shirt collar open at the top button. He looked at her, and she looked at him, and he read the situation accurately enough not to speak immediately. He sat in his chair. A minute passed. The ivy moved. He called, she said. I know, he said. Taeho flagged the number. She looked at him. You monitor my calls? Taeho monitors numbers associated with Whitmore, he said. When one appears, he alerts me. He does not listen. He notifies. She looked at the garden again. I told him not to contact my father or me without a lawyer, she said. Good, he said. They sat in the dark, and the garden was between them, and the night was around them, and after a few minutes she realized that this was the first time she had been in the compound garden after dark. And the specific quality of sitting in this garden after dark with him was different from the morning terrace, slower and less structured, with more of the raw material of the day still present in both of them. Du-hyun, she said. Yes, he said. What did it cost you to go into that room the night of the auction? She said. Not professionally. Personally. He was quiet for a long moment. I have shut down operations in that building twice before, he said. Each time I walked away and the building reopened under different terms. Each time I told myself the next time would be different. He paused. Walking into that room and seeing you on that platform cost me the comfortable distance I had kept between myself and the full weight of what those operations are. She looked at him. I had managed it as a systemic problem, he said. A network to dismantle. A structure to break. Walking in and seeing a specific person. A person with a history and a family and 3 years of work built in this city. That removed the distance permanently. She was very still. That is what it cost, he said. The distance. and I do not want it back. She looked at the ivy wall, and she felt the full size of what he had just said arrive. She did not respond to it directly because it was too large for a direct response. She let it sit in the garden between them, and she trusted that he understood she had received it. After a long while she said, "Come to my parents for dinner soon." He looked at her. "My mother will have questions," she said. "I expect she will," he said. "You will be fine," she said. "I know," he said, and the quiet certainty of it moved through the dark between them. She moved into the new apartment at the end of the week. 6th floor, Yongsan-gu, east-facing window with a view of the river on clear mornings. She had chosen it herself from the list Du Hyun had prepared, and she had signed the lease herself, and she had informed him of the decision as a fact rather than a request for approval. He had said, "Taeho will drive your things on Friday." She had said, "Thank you." On her last morning at the compound, she came to the terrace, and he was there, as he always was, with his mug and his document. They drank their tea and talked about the current state of the Whitmore situation. Practically, specifically, what had progressed and what was still active. And the conversation was the same as every other morning conversation they had had on that terrace, except that both of them knew it was the last one. And that knowledge sat in the space between the words like something that had not yet been acknowledged. When she stood to go inside, he stood as well, which she had not expected. "Serafina," he said. She looked at him. He was holding his mug and looking at her with the expression of a man who has decided to say something, and is finishing the decision as he stands there. "The card I gave you," he said. "Use it." "I have it," she said. "I mean for things that are not urgent," he said. "Not only for the Whitmore situation." She looked at him for a moment. "Things that are not urgent," she said. "Yes," he said. She held the look for one more second, and then she nodded and went inside, and she was smiling before she reached the kitchen, and she made sure no one saw it. When she arrived at the apartment that evening, the kitchen already had a teapot on the counter, and a rice cooker in its box, and a set of cups arranged neatly in the cabinet. She stood in the kitchen and looked at them. She called Mrs. Han. "Mr. Kong chose the teapot himself," Mrs. Han said, and ended the call with the precision of someone delivering a single piece of information that required no follow-up. Serafina stood in her new kitchen with the phone in her hand and the teapot on the counter, and she smiled fully, privately. In the way you smile at things when no one is watching, and you do not need to manage the size of it. She called him from Incheon Airport 3 weeks later. The Singapore project had come up in her second week at the consulting firm, and she had packed her bag and prepared her materials with the focused satisfaction of someone returning to the shape of their real life. She was at the departure gate with coffee when she dialed. "I am at Incheon," she said. "Singapore today. I wanted you to know." A brief pause. "Safe flight," he said. "Thank you." Another pause, slightly longer. "Call when you land," he said. She smiled at the departure board. "I will," she said. She called when she landed. He answered before the second ring. She stood in the arrivals hall of Changi Airport and talked to him for 4 minutes about nothing of particular significance. The flight, the weather in Singapore, a detail about the project that she mentioned because she felt like mentioning it. And when she put the phone down, she stood for a moment in the busy hall and noticed the particular warmth in her chest that the 4 minutes had produced. She noticed it carefully. She did not dismiss it. She had been back from Singapore for 10 days when it happened. It was a Thursday evening in October. She was walking back to her Yongsan apartment from the subway station 2 blocks away, her bag over one shoulder and her phone in her hand with a half-typed message to Alma about weekend plans. A car pulled up beside her. It was moving slowly, matching her pace, which was the specific detail that registered first. Not the car itself, but the fact of its speed matching hers. She kept walking. The car kept pace. She stopped. The car stopped. The window came down. James Whitmore was in the back seat. He looked at her through the open window with an expression she had not seen from him before. Not the composed detachment of the auction room. Not the controlled precision of the phone call. Something rawer than either of those. Something that had been held in professional management for months and was beginning to show at the edges. "Get in," he said. "No," she said. She said it simply, without theatrics, because the simplest version of a refusal was also the clearest. "Serafina." He said her name with the weight of 2 years behind it. "We need to talk. What has happened between us?" "You put me on a platform," she said. "That is what happened between us." He leaned slightly toward the window. "Kong Do-hyun is not the person you think he is," he said. "What he has told you about himself, about his intentions, he operates on leverage. Everything he has done has been to position you as something he controls. She looked at him. You are telling me this from the back seat of a car that has been following me down the street, she said. His jaw tightened. Go home, James, she said. Whatever you are planning, whatever angle you think you have found, it is not going to work. Go home. She turned and walked. The car stayed at the curb behind her. She walked the 2 blocks to her building, through the lobby, into the elevator, and when the elevator doors closed, she pressed her back against the wall and let the fear that she had been managing for the last 3 minutes arrive at full size. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and breathed and counted 4 floors to her own. Inside her apartment, she called Do Hyun. He answered before the second ring. She told him what had happened. The car, the window, the conversation. She told it in order, clearly, and she held the shaking in her hands to herself because the shaking was not information he needed. It was just the body processing what the mind had already handled. He was quiet for 5 seconds when she finished. Are you inside your apartment? He said. Yes, she said. I am fine. I know you are fine, he said, and the way he said it was not dismissal. It was recognition. He was not asking if she was fine. He was confirming that he knew her well enough to know that fine was accurate and not performed. I am coming. You do not have to. I am coming, he said, and the repetition was not insistence, it was information. He was telling her a fact. He was there in 22 minutes. She knew because she was sitting on the floor by the window when the intercom buzzed, and she had been watching the clock with the part of her mind that was not occupied with composing itself. She let him in. He came through the door and he looked at her, and she looked at him, and he crossed the apartment and sat on the floor beside her, his back against the sofa, close enough that his shoulder was touching hers. He did not say anything. She looked at the window and the city and felt his shoulder against hers, and the shaking in her hands stopped. After a minute, she said, He told me you were using leverage, that everything you had done was to position me as something you controlled. Yes, Do-hyun said. He would say that. I know, she said. I know it is not true. He turned his head and looked at her profile. How do you know? He said. He asked it genuinely, not as a test, as a real question. She thought about it. Because the things you have done for me have consistently reduced your control over my situation rather than increased it, she said. You paid a debt that would have kept me obligated to you. You let me choose my own apartment from a list rather than offering me one you owned. You told me the forum meeting would eventually trace back to me rather than concealing that. Every time you had a choice between giving me more autonomy or less, you gave me more. She paused. A man who was building leverage does not do that. He looked at her for a long moment. He is frightened, Do-hyun said. Whitmore. Frightened men do frightened things. Following you down a street is the action of someone who has run out of constructed options and is improvising. What does an improvising James Whitmore do next? She said. Something less careful than his usual approach, he said, which makes him easier to move against. She looked at the window. Stay tonight, she said. He looked at her. On the sofa, she said clearly. I am not asking for anything other than someone in the apartment. I do not want to be alone with the lock and the street outside. He held her gaze for one moment. All right, he said. She got him a blanket and a pillow from the bedroom cupboard and set them on the sofa, and he took them from her, and she went to bed and lay in the dark and listened to the apartment settle around her with another person in it. She slept better than she had in weeks. In the morning, she woke to the smell of coffee. She came out of the bedroom, and he was in her kitchen with 2 cups on the counter, and he had found the coffee she kept in the second cabinet, which was not an obvious place, and he had made it correctly. She looked at the 2 cups on her counter. She looked at him. He looked back at her with the expression he used when he had done something, and was not going to explain it. You found the good coffee, she said. Second cabinet, he said. It made more sense there than the first. She took her cup. She stood at the counter, and he stood at the counter, and they drank their coffee in the morning kitchen light, and the city outside was doing its ordinary Thursday business. And for a few minutes the whole world was just the kitchen and the coffee and him standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of his arm near hers. He set his cup down. I need to go, he said. I have a meeting at 7:30. I know, she said. He moved toward the door. He stopped. She watched him stop. He turned back, and he looked at her across the kitchen with an expression that had nothing of the professional layer in it, no management and no processing, just the thing itself. The specific look of a man who is in a kitchen with a woman he does not want to leave, and who has decided that the honest acknowledgement of that is better than the performance of ease. Lock the door, he said. I always lock the door, she said. He nodded. He turned and left. She stood in her kitchen with her coffee and listened to the front door close, and then the specific silence of an apartment that had been occupied by two people and was now occupied by one. And the silence had a shape to it that was different from the silence of before he arrived. She stood in it for a long time. Amma called her 3 days later. The forum, Amma said. Have you seen it? She had not seen it. She opened the link Amma sent. James Whitmore had published a post on a private business networking forum. Carefully worded, legally precise, naming Kang Do-hyun's organization as having interfered with a legitimate contractual financial arrangement. No event specified. No person named except Do-hyun. Designed to apply professional and reputational pressure while remaining within certain defensible lines. She read it twice. Then she called Do-hyun. I have seen it, he said before she finished. He is going public because private leverage is not working, she said. Yes, he said. What is the response, she said. Legal team is preparing one, he said. But there is something faster available, and I think you already know what it is. The 4 contacts, she said. The private meeting. Yes, he said. He will trace it back to me, she said. Eventually, he said. I will not tell you otherwise. She looked at the city from her window. Set up the meeting, she said. A pause. You are certain? He put me on a platform, she said. Yes, I am certain. The meeting was in a private dining room in Gangnam the following week. For people. 2 men she recognized from trade publications, a woman well known in Korean African business circles, and a 4th she did not recognize, but who had the bearing of someone whose opinion moved things. Serafina spoke for 22 minutes. She was precise. She was completely calm. She gave them the sequence of the night. The address texted by her former boyfriend, the car he sent, the woman who took her phone, the corridor and the curtain and the platform and the light, the restraint on her wrists, the bidding, James in the second row explaining her father's debt with the composure of a man reviewing a quarterly report. She spoke in a voice that did not waver once because the anger had been burning at a steady, manageable temperature for long enough that it was fuel rather than fire, and it kept her voice level and her words clear and her eye contact direct. The room was fully silent throughout. When she finished, the woman she recognized from Korean African trade circles said, How are you now? Not the situation. You personally. Serafina looked at her. Angry, she said, and more capable than I was 2 months ago. Both things at the same time. The woman nodded slowly, with the nod of someone who has been both of those things simultaneously and recognizes the specific combination. Do-hyun sat in the room during her account. He answered 2 questions about his own involvement. Directly, without evasion, without making it about himself. And then he sat back and let the 4 people talk. In the corridor afterward, he walked beside her toward the exit. You were extraordinary in there, he said. She looked at him. He was not a man who used words like extraordinary lightly or casually. She knew this already. I was honest, she said. It is easier than people think when you have been carrying the story long enough. Some people carry it and it defeats them, he said. She looked at him. Were you worried I would be defeated by it? She said. He thought about this for a moment with the honesty she had come to expect from him. For a day or 2, he said. After that, no. What changed after a day or 2? She said. He looked forward. You brought me tea, he said. She stopped walking. He took 2 more steps and stopped and turned to look at her standing in the corridor behind him. She looked at him. He looked at her. The corridor was empty and lit with the kind of light that has no shadows. You decided I was not going to be defeated because I brought you tea? She said. Because of how you brought it, he said. You knocked. You told me I had been on the phone for 3 hours. You set it on the corner of the desk and you left. You did not need me to acknowledge the gesture. You made it because it was the thing to do. She held his gaze. That was the moment, he said. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she started walking again, and he turned and walked beside her, and neither of them said anything else until they were outside in the Gangnam evening, where the city was lit and moving and indifferent, and she breathed the night air and felt lighter than she had since October. The forum post disappeared within 48 hours. She was at her desk when Amma messaged her. It is gone. She texted Do-hyun immediately. The post is gone. I know, he replied. What exactly did you do? A pause long enough that she looked at her phone twice. Evidence that existed was not allowed to disappear. People made their own decisions once they understood the full picture. She looked at the city from her window. Thank you, she typed. His reply came quickly. Come back in one piece. She stared at the message. She had not gone anywhere. She typed back, I am already in Seoul. A pause. Then I know. I meant in general. She read those words and felt them land somewhere specific and warm, and she sat with them for a full minute before she put the phone down. She called him instead of texting back. He answered immediately. I just wanted to hear your voice, she said. She had not planned to say it. It arrived because it was true. The silence on his end lasted 3 seconds. Come back in one piece, he said again, and his voice was different this time. The words were the same, but the distance between them and his chest had closed entirely. I will, she said. She brought her parents to the compound 6 weeks after she moved into the apartment. Her mother had been asking to come since the 2nd week. Her father had been building himself back toward normal for long enough that the visit felt like a declaration. Do-hyun met them at the entrance. He shook her father's hand with both of his, which was the Korean way of showing respect to an elder, and her father registered this and his shoulders adjusted. He gave her mother a small bow, and her mother examined him from head to foot with the thoroughness of a woman who has been managing her household and everyone in it for 35 years and does not pretend otherwise. Mrs. Han had prepared a meal that moved between Korean and West African flavors without forcing the combination. Dishes that honored both traditions in a way that felt considered rather than performative. Her mother tasted the first dish and looked at Mrs. Han and nodded once, which was her mother's version of high praise. At the table, Do-hyun spoke to her father about the import business with the specific knowledge of someone who had read the file and thought about it. He asked her father one question about the new distribution line that opened a 40-minute conversation. Her father talked the way he talked about the business when he believed in it, with his hands, with energy leaning forward. Serafina watched this from across the table. She watched Do-hyun listen to her father. He was not performing attention. He was not waiting for his turn to speak. He was actually listening, and at the right moments he asked the follow-up question that showed he had absorbed what came before it. Her father's shoulders, which had carried the posture of a man under debt and shame for 2 years, were simply shoulders again. Near the end of the meal, her mother said something in Yoruba. She said it to Serafina, quietly, in the tone her mother used when she was saying something she did not want the room to hear. What she said was, he looks at you when you are not looking. He looks at you the way your father used to look at me before he told me. Serafina did not translate this. She says the food was excellent, she told Do-hyun. And thank you for having us. Do-hyun looked at her mother. You are welcome, he said. I hope you will come again. Her mother smiled at her plate and did not look at Serafina, but Serafina felt the smile from across the table. On the drive home, her father reached forward from the back seat and placed his hand on her shoulder. He left it there. She covered it with her own. Her mother looked out the window at the Seoul night with the expression of a woman who has updated her assessment of a situation and is satisfied with the new version. Spring came and James Whitmore reappeared. He had been quiet for 8 months. The professional isolation that had followed the private meeting had been effective. His sole presence had diminished to the point where Serafina had stopped monitoring for his name. Then Amma called on a Tuesday afternoon. He is approaching Mr. O, Amma said. Serafina was at her desk. She put her pen down. Mr. O was her father's primary Korean trade partner, a man who had known her father for 15 years, who was the anchor of the import business's recovery plan, without whom the new distribution line did not have the infrastructure it needed to function. James had reached out to him with the careful precision of a man who had learned from his earlier failures. He was not threatening. He was not aggressive. He was raising concerns. Professionally, calmly, with the specific language of someone who wanted to appear to be doing Mr. O a favor by sharing information about potential instability in a business partner. He is dismantling from the outside, Serafina said. Yes, Amma said. She was already reaching for her phone. She called Do-hyun. He picked up before the second ring. I know, he said. 30 minutes ago. I am coming with you to see Mr. O, she said. Serafina. I know Mr. O, she said. I have met him twice. He has known my father for 15 years. He will receive this differently from me than from you. You know that. A silence. Tonight at 8, he said. The meeting was in a restaurant in Upgyujong. Mr. O arrived with an associate and the careful expression of a man who was genuinely uncertain and was trying to determine the right direction. Serafina spoke first. She did not use legal language. She did not use Do-hyun's authority as a frame. She spoke as herself, as Benjamin Adeyemi's daughter, as someone who knew exactly what James Whitmore's concern-raising actually was and what it was designed to produce. She gave Mr. O the complete picture. Clearly, respectfully, without embellishment. She finished, and she let him sit with it, and she watched his face as he processed. Mr. O looked at his associate. Then he looked at Serafina. His first message felt wrong, he said. I read it 3 times trying to identify why. Because his interest is not yours, she said. His interest is in your withdrawal from the partnership. Nothing in that message was for your benefit. Mr. O looked at Du Hyun. The business is recovering genuinely, he said. On schedule, Du Hyun said. The new distribution line is viable. The management is sound. Mr. O nodded slowly. He looked at Serafina one more time with the look of a man finalizing a decision. Your father is a good man, he said. He is, she said. The partnership held. Her father called her the following week, and his voice was the voice she remembered from her childhood. The voice he used when something he had built was working, when the numbers made sense and the future had a recognizable shape. She stood at her apartment window and listened to him talk and felt something in her chest that had been tightly held for a very long time open itself with the slow, careful expansion of something that has been waiting long enough to be certain it was safe. Du Hyun was away for 3 weeks in the summer. He told her he was handling something that required his physical presence elsewhere. He gave her Taeho and Jaiwa's numbers, and he told her to call if anything changed. He called her from wherever he was on the 17th day. The line had the slightly degraded quality of a connection running through multiple points. How are you? He said. Good, she said. She was sitting on the floor of her apartment with her back against the sofa, the window open and the summer evening coming in. I went to Accra last week for the West Africa project. 10 days. How was it? He said. Like going home to something I had been drifting away from without noticing, she said. I stood on the beach at Labadi one evening, and I felt more like myself than I have in a very long time. He was quiet for a moment. That is important, he said. I know, she said. I needed to be reminded of the full size of myself. Seoul can make you forget that you are bigger than one city. Another pause. I will be back Thursday, he said. I know, she said. Jaiwoo had mentioned it casually 2 days ago, and she had kept the information to herself. A brief silence. How do you know? He said. Jaiwoo talks, she said. This time she heard it clearly, a short sound, almost inaudible, controlled immediately. But it was there. Kang Du-hyun had just almost laughed. She pressed her lips together and looked at her ceiling. Come to dinner Friday, she said. At mine. I will cook. The pause that followed was the longest she had ever received from him. Yes, he said. 7 o'clock, she said. Yes, he said again. She ended the call and sat on her floor in the summer evening and felt the warmth in her chest that his voice had become and did not try to contain it or categorize it. She let it be what it was. She cooked groundnut soup the way her mother made it, the way her grandmother had made it in Lagos before her mother was born. The recipe passed forward through women who knew that food was one of the languages love spoke when it was not yet ready to be named. She set the table properly. She put out the good dishes she had bought specifically to replace the ones she had left behind in the rush of leaving Mapogu. She wore the green dress she had bought in Accra that she liked for the way it moved. He arrived at exactly 7. He was in a dark jacket over a plain shirt, the most casual she had seen him away from the compound. He stood in the doorway and looked at her apartment with the careful attention he gave to things that mattered to him. Come in, she said. He came in. He walked through the apartment the way he walked through rooms, unhurried, reading it. He stopped at the bookshelf, and she watched his eyes move across the spines. They stopped on the Korean Chekhov edition from Insadong. My mother sent me this one, he said. I know, she said. You told me. He turned and looked at her across the apartment. She was standing in the kitchen doorway with a wooden spoon in her hand and the light behind her. He looked at her the way he had started looking at her somewhere around the 5th morning on the terrace, like something he had decided about quietly and had not yet spoken. She held his gaze for 1 second and then went back to the stove. He sat at the kitchen counter while she finished cooking, and they talked. They talked about Accra and about a case his organization had been managing that he described with the careful omissions she had grown used to. And she asked questions that worked around the omissions and found the shape of what was there. She told him about a junior member of her team who had surprised her completely. He told her about a trade negotiation in Busan that had taken 3 times as long as it should have because of one person's ego. She set the soup on the table. He sat across from her and ate. He ate with full attention, the way he did everything. And when he finished the first serving, he looked at her and said, This is remarkable. She looked at him. My grandmother's recipe, she said. Tell me about her, he said. She looked at him across the table. No one had ever asked her that over dinner. Not once in 2 years with James, who had eaten her food and complimented it and moved immediately to the next topic. She told him about her grandmother, about the Lagos kitchen that was always too hot and always too full of people and always, somehow, exactly right. About the way her grandmother had talked while she cooked, a continuous narration of everything she was doing and why, as though the recipe was not a sequence of steps, but a conversation being had with the food. About the evening Serafina was 12 years old, and her grandmother had put her hands over Serafina's on the wooden spoon and said, "You feel when it is ready. You do not look for it." Du Hyun listened to every word. He ate a second full serving of the soup. She watched this and said nothing because some satisfactions were better private. After dinner they moved to the floor by the window because the table was small, and the view from the floor was better. The city was below them in its evening configuration, the Han River dark and wide between the lit districts. He set his tea down and turned to look at her. "I want to ask you something," he said. She turned to face him fully. "Do you want to continue this?" he said. She understood the question completely. Not the evening. The full accumulated weight of the last months. The terrace mornings and the corridor and the calls, and the way he had said come back in one piece with his voice 6 degrees closer to his chest the second time. "Yes," she said. "I want to continue this." He held her gaze. "My life is not simple," he said. "There will be periods of absence. There will be people who come at me and use you as the direction they come from. I will do everything in my power to protect against that. But I cannot eliminate the risk." "I know what your life is," she said. "I have been paying attention. You deserve someone whose life is." Du Hyun. She said his name and watched him stop. "I have spent 2 years with someone whose life appeared simple and turned out to be constructed entirely around using me. I am not interested in appearances. I am interested in what is real." He looked at her. "And this is real," he said. She held his gaze. "You went into a room full of dangerous men and raised your hand once," she said. "You had my father's debt restructured before the sun came up. You chose a teapot. You listened to a story about my grandmother like it was the most important information you had received all week." She paused. "Yes," she said. "This is real." He looked at her for a long moment with the expression of someone receiving something they had been careful not to want, and are now not certain what to do with the fact that they have it. "I have been thinking about you since the night I walked into that room," he said. "Every day since. I think about you with a consistency and a completeness that I have not had room for before, and I find that I do not want to have less of it." She looked at him. "That," she said quietly, "is the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me." "I am working on saying things better," he said. She laughed. "The real kind. The full kind. The kind she had been keeping at a careful distance since October, and that arrived now without permission. Warm and complete." He watched her laugh, and his expression did the thing she had been cataloging since the 5th morning. The thing where it almost completed itself and then did not. And this time she reached out and put her hand on his jaw, and he went completely still. She leaned forward and kissed him. He kissed her back, and his hand came to her face and held it there with the steadiness that was the signature of everything he did. And she felt in that steadiness the answer to every question she had been asking since October. When she pulled back, she looked at him, and he looked at her, and neither of them said anything, because nothing needed to be added. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. Both of them quiet. The city going on below in its usual indifferent abundance. She could feel his heartbeat through his shoulder. Steady. Of course it was. Everything about him was steady. 3 weeks after the evening on the floor by the window, Du Hyun went quiet. Not absent. He answered her messages and responded to calls and communicated about ongoing matters when there was something to communicate. But the quality of the communication changed. The spaces between her messages and his replies grew. The calls got shorter. The warmth that had been arriving in his voice since the dinner retracted. She noticed on the 3rd day, and she gave it another 3 days before she acknowledged it to herself. On the 9th day she called him, and he answered on the 3rd ring rather than the 1st or 2nd, and she said, "What is happening?" He said, "Everything is fine." She said, "Everything is fine" is not an answer. A pause. "I have a lot to manage right now," he said. "I know you do," she said. "That is not what I am asking about." Silence. Du Hyun. She said his name with the full weight of 9 days behind it. "If you have decided something has changed, tell me directly. Do not manage me with distance. I have had 2 years of being managed. I will not have it from you." A longer silence. long enough that she thought he was constructing a response. Instead he said, "Can I come over?" "Yes," she said. He arrived in 40 minutes. He came through the door and she could see it before he spoke. The effort in his stillness, which was usually effortless. The controlled quality that was normally the natural state of him working harder than usual. He sat in the kitchen chair, and she sat across from him, and she waited because she had learned that he came to things in his own time. "I have been here before," he said. She waited. "A person who mattered to me," he said. "The position I occupy, the life I lead." It put her in a situation she had not signed up for. The outcome was serious. He paused. "I decided afterward that there were certain things I did not have the right to ask of someone." She looked at him. "What things?" she said. "A normal life," he said. "Safety that does not require management. A future that does not contain the possibility of being used as leverage against me." "And yet you are here," she said. He looked at her. "You decided those things," she said. "And then you went to an auction and raised your hand and brought me here and made me tea on mornings and told me to call you for things that were not urgent." She looked at him steadily. "You decided all of that, and then you started the rest of it anyway." "Yes," he said. "So the decision you made after the last person," she said, "was overridden by something." He looked at his hands on the table. "You brought me tea," he said. "I know that." "It does not sound like anything," she said. "I understand what you mean." He held her gaze. "The woman before," she said carefully. "What happened to her?" He was quiet for a long moment. "She was not hurt," he said. "She was frightened, badly enough that she left. She made the right decision, and I have never blamed her for it. And you have been carrying the responsibility for frightening her for." She paused. "How long ago?" 6 years, he said. She looked at him. 6 years of a decision made from guilt. 6 years of a life structured around a protection that was also a deprivation. "Do-hyun," she said. He looked at her. "I am not her," she said. "I am not inside your life because I did not know what it was. I am here because I watched it for months and I chose it. The risk is not something you are concealing from me. It is something I have calculated and accepted." She paused. "What happened 3 weeks ago that brought this back?" He was quiet for a moment. "Whitmore's lawyer filed a motion," he said, "attempting to have my assets frozen pending the financial dispute. It failed. But the attempt means he is willing to use legal infrastructure as a weapon, which means anyone associated with me is a potential target. And you pulled back to protect me," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "Kang Do-hyun." She said the full name and watched him look up. "If a risk involves me, I am part of the conversation about how to manage it. You do not get to make protective decisions about my life without consulting the person whose life it is. That is the same removal of agency that James performed, just with better intentions." His jaw tightened. She watched it tighten, and she watched him process what she had said, and she watched the moment it arrived. The specific expression of a man who has just received an accurate piece of information he cannot argue against. "You are right," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, and then something in his expression shifted. The 6 years of guilt-built distance had not vanished, but it had rearranged itself into something that could coexist with the present rather than governing it. "I do not know how to do this without the protective instinct becoming control," he said. "That is an honest answer. I am going to get it wrong sometimes." "I know," she said. "I will tell you when you do." "You will," he said, and it was not a question. The corner of his mouth moved. She stood up from the table and went to the counter and made 2 cups of tea with the correct ratio, because Mrs. Hahn had shown her on the second morning, and she had never forgotten it. She set one in front of him. He looked at the cup. He looked at her. "You always make tea," he said. "It is the right thing to do," she said. "It is usually the right thing to do." He picked up the cup and held it in both hands, and she sat back down across from him, and they sat in the kitchen with the evening outside the window, and the 9 days of distance closed itself quietly without ceremony, and neither of them said anything else for a long time, and the silence between them was the good kind. She was with Do-hyun when the arrest happened. They were in his compound on the back terrace on a Wednesday evening in November. Mrs. Hahn had left dinner on the table, and they had eaten and come outside afterward the way they did now on evenings, when neither of them needed to be anywhere else. The garden was in its late autumn reduction, the ivy on the far wall down to its skeleton structure, dark and intricate against the stone. She had her phone in her hand because she had been showing him a photograph from the Accra project, a building with a particular quality of light she had wanted him to see, when the notification appeared on the screen. She read it. She read it again. She set the phone face up on the armrest between them without speaking. He glanced at the screen. He read it. He looked at the garden. Neither of them said anything for a long time. James Whitmore had been arrested that afternoon. The charges had been filed by a consortium of individuals from the auction network, several of whom had, under the accumulated pressure of their own legal exposure and the specific information that had reached the right audiences through the right channels, decided that cooperation was the only viable direction. The charges were detailed and specific. The evidence file was substantial. The auction venue had been named. 3 other venues operating under related arrangements had been named. The network that had allowed all of them to function was named. She looked at the garden. She thought about the cream blazer and the portfolio and the car James had sent and the curtain opening. She thought about the light on the platform and the number climbing and the restraint on her wrists and 23 men in curved rows looking up at her. She thought about a hand going up in the shadow section. "It is over," she said. "The legal process continues," Du-hyun said. "But the operational part is over, yes." She nodded. She felt the specific quality of the ending. Not triumph, not relief exactly, something more complete than both of those. A chapter closing. The full stop at the end of a sentence that had been too long. "Did you build the case?" she said. He turned his head and looked at her. "I preserved evidence," he said. "I ensured that the people who had been willing to speak were not pressured into silence. I facilitated introductions between individuals whose accounts, combined, produced a picture that no single account could. I did not file anything under my name. I did not appear in the proceeding." She looked at him. "You built the case," she said. He held her gaze. "I made certain that what happened to you was not allowed to become one of the things that are known but never spoken," he said. "That was what I could do. I did it." She looked at him for a long moment, and she felt the full weight of what that had cost. Not money, not time, but the specific exposure of a man who operates carefully, who does not make unnecessary moves, making a deliberate and sustained move on behalf of someone else's justice. "Thank you," she said. He looked at her and he said, "You spoke first. The meeting in Gangnam. Your voice in that room was the first piece. Everything I did was built on that foundation." She reached over and took his hand and held it. He held hers back, and they sat in the compound garden with the ivy bare on the wall, and the Seoul night around them, and the chapter closed between them quietly and completely. After a long while she said, "He looked at me from that second row like I was a line item." "I know," he said. "And you looked at me from the shadow section like I was a person someone had decided to wrong," she said. He turned his head and looked at her. "That is the difference," she said, "between every version of every person I could have met in that room. You looked at me like the wrong was the thing that needed addressing. Not me. The wrong." He turned toward her fully and looked at her with the expression that had arrived on the night of the kiss and had stayed. The one with no management in it. The unprocessed version of him that she had decided she would spend a very long time learning. "Yes," he said. "That was exactly it." She leaned into his shoulder. He put his arm around her. The garden was bare and still, and the city beyond the walls was going on with its ordinary, indifferent abundance. A year after the auction, her father paid the final installment. She found out because he called her himself at 10 on a Tuesday morning. "He called me," her father said. "Kang Du-hyun. He called me personally to say the account was closed." She was at her desk. She put her pen down. He said, her father continued with the careful quality of someone reporting something that moved them. He said he hoped the business would continue to grow. Those were his exact words. Not congratulations, not good luck. He hoped the business would continue to grow, as though he had been watching it and knew it would. Serafina looked at her window. "He did not have to call," her father said. "No," she said. "He did not." A pause. "I would like to have him for dinner," her father said. "At our table. Your mother agrees." She looked at the window for a long moment. "I will tell him," she said. "He will come." "How do you know?" her father said. "Because I will ask him," she said. Her father made a small sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been the sound a man makes when he realizes his daughter has become someone he did not need to worry about as much as he thought. She moved into the larger apartment in the spring. Same building, 2 floors higher, east-facing window with a river view on clear mornings. Du-hyun arrived on moving day without being asked, with Taeho and Jaiwoo, and managed the logistics of the move with the quiet efficiency he brought to everything. She had not asked him to come. He had simply appeared. She had looked at him in her doorway on moving morning with boxes around his feet and said, "Did I ask you to help?" He had looked back at her with complete steadiness. No, he said. She had moved out of the doorway to let him in. He carried her bookshelf up in 2 sections. She watched him handle the Chekhov collection from across the room, setting it on the new shelf with the specific care he gave to things he had decided mattered. She turned away before he saw her face. On a warm evening in April, she was on the building's rooftop when she heard the stairwell door. He came through it with 2 cups of tea. She looked at him. I did not tell you I was up here, she said. Mrs. Han told Jaiwoo, he said. Jaiwoo told me. She took the cup he offered. You have a very effective information network, she said. It has its uses, he said. They stood at the roof's edge and looked at Seoul below them. The Han River was dark and wide, and the lights of the city on both sides of it were the particular configuration she had memorized from her east-facing window. A plane moved across the sky in its slow arc toward Gimpo. My father called this morning, she said. I know, he said. He called me first. She turned to look at him. He wanted to say thank you in person, Do-hyun said. We spoke for 15 minutes. He told me about the new distribution line, a full quarter ahead of the projection. She looked at his profile, the jaw, the watch, the slight tension in his shoulders that she had stopped reading as threat and had come to understand as simply the posture of someone who had never been allowed to fully put the weight down. She thought about asking him one day if he would like to put it down. She thought she might ask that eventually. There was time. Do you ever think about that night? She said. The auction. He was quiet for a moment. Sometimes, he said, when I drive through that part of the city. What do you think? She said. He turned and looked at her fully. Not the sideways glance of the terrace mornings or the careful attention of the corridor. He looked at her the way he had from the shadow section of the auction room. Directly, fully, trying to understand something important. I think, he said, that I have never been more grateful for any decision I have made in my life than the decision to walk into that room. She held his gaze. I think, he continued, that the version of my life that does not contain you is a version I am unable to seriously consider anymore. She looked at him and felt the specific quality of being seen. Not from a platform, not as an asset in a plan, not as someone useful, but as the specific person she was, known and chosen, and continued. Do-hyun, she said. Yes, he said. I am going to marry you, she said. He looked at her. I am informing you, she said. Not asking. I decided in that kitchen the morning after the car followed me down the street. When you stayed on the sofa and made coffee from the second cabinet the next morning. That was the morning I knew. Something happened in his face. Something that did not stop itself this time, that completed its full arrival. Warm and uncontrolled, and entirely unlike the stillness she had spent a year learning to read. That was months ago, he said. I know, she said. You waited that long to tell me, he said. I was waiting for you to finish the conversation about the woman from 6 years ago, she said. I needed you to put that down before I handed you something else to carry. He looked at her for a long moment, and the expression on his face was the most unguarded she had ever seen from him. Open in the way that things are open when they have been held carefully for a long time and are finally allowed to be set down. He pulled her in and held her with both arms, and she went to him and pressed her face into the side of his neck and felt his heartbeat under her cheek. Steady, steady, always steady. And she closed her eyes and felt Seoul below them and the sky above them and the specific warmth of being exactly where she was supposed to be. I have been certain, he said quietly into her hair, since the night you brought me tea. She laughed. Against his neck, warm and full and real. His arms tightened. Below them the city went on. Enormous, indifferent, luminous, completely unaware that 2 people were standing on a rooftop deciding to stay in each other's lives for all of the rest of it. Thank you for being here until the very end of this story. That means the world to me. Now I need your thoughts. Was James Whitmore the most calculating villain you have seen? Or did the men in that bidding room carry equal blame for what they participated in? Did Kang Do-hyun go too far at any point, or did he never go far enough? And which moment hit you the hardest? Tell me in the comments. Every single one. If this story reached something in you, please like it, share it with someone who needs a story that earns its ending, and subscribe so you do not miss what we build next. This community is growing every day, and I am grateful for every person in it. This is Jasmine. I will see you in the next story.